lovely and darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy. Today I am reviewing Dear Martin by Nic Stone. I listened to the audiobook for this, which was narrated by Dion Graham. This is a young adult contemporary novel that focuses on Justyce, who is an African-American teenager, but he goes to this elite boarding school that is primarily white, and he is Ivy League bound. Like, he has the highest expectations for himself. He's really good at school, he's really good at thinking for himself, and he basically has done everything he's supposed to do, and yet he still gets pulled over and profiled for being an African-American teenager. Like, one of the first things that happens in this book is that he is helping his ex-girlfriend, who is a mixed race, but, like, really light-skinned, white passing, and she's drunk and resisting him. And he's like, you cannot drive. You are way too drunk to drive. And so the cops pull over, see him and a white girl arguing, and they put him in handcuffs, and they don't let him speak. He's not allowed to defend himself. Say that, like, hey, we weren't, like, I know her. They aren't listening to the girl either, and so he spends 3 hours in the early hours of the morning in handcuffs just because he's black and he fit a profile. And he doesn't even get released until one of his parents' friends who are lawyers come and talk to the cops. So it's an awful situation, and Justyce starts thinking about all the things he's done that he's supposed to do, that he thought was going to save him from this kind of profiling, and yet he's still just seen as a lowlife and an African-American and just a black thug, despite everything else that's going on in his life. And so he's dealing with racial inequality and profiling. So he starts this project where he starts writing letters to Martin Luther King Jr. So, Dear Martin, these are all the letters that Justyce is writing to Dr. King. And he's grappling with what Dr. King would do in today's society. Does Dr. King's nonviolent protesting and his way of thinking still apply in this is like 2017, but, like, does it still apply to today's society? Is this still effective? And so he starts this experiment. So part of the book is just narrative following Justyce around his everyday life, and part of it are these letters to Dr. King where Justyce is, like, processing and thinking things out. And they're part journal entries, part, like, letters to a friend. Things do get, like, hard in this book. It is not, like, a light read. It definitely focuses on police brutality and racism, but not just, like, institutional racism, but, like, everyday racism that, like, we subconsciously start being exposed to from, like, a very young age, too. So we are dealing with the racism that Justyce is experiencing from the police and the media, and watching how society treats African Americans, especially when it comes to police brutality. He's looking at cases of other teenagers who have gotten, like, pulled over from the cops and had it way worse than him. And he's, like, sorting through those. But then we also have his white classmates. And one of his classmates who's also black. And his experiences being from a predominantly white neighborhood. So Justyce grew up in a more inner city, poor, mostly black neighborhood, whereas his best friend Manny is also African American, but he grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And so they have different experiences and different internalized racisms. So, like, Manny's talking about how he's scared of black girls because he didn't grow up around them. And so he doesn't think he could ever date a black girl, even though he is also black, because he has his own opinions about what black women are like. He has his own racism, but, like, Justyce's mother also is racist against white girls. She doesn't want Justyce dating somebody who is white because she sees white, especially white women, a certain way. So we're dealing with all kinds of, so many different, like, complicated parts of racism. We also have discussions in their classes where, like, literally Manny and Justyce may be the only two black people in that classroom, and having all these different whites talking about racism. And a lot of the guys are like, well, I don't see color, and so racism isn't a problem. But yet they're still holding very racist, very prejudiced opinions, even when they aren't seeing color. So, like, there's an instance in here or they're talking about SAT scores, and the one guy assumes that he must have gotten a higher score than Justyce just because, like, he didn't actually say because I'm white and you're black, but, like, that's where it boils down to. And they're also talking about things like one of the guys dressed up in blackface to play Martin Luther King in, like, a school play, and how he's like, look, we're so cool that, like, a white guy can be a black guy in a play. And it's like, there's some cringeworthy moments in here as we're exploring race from multiple different perspectives. So the class discussions start revolving around things like affirmative action, and how the white guys are like, well, they should have gotten in on their own merits. They shouldn't just, like, get a spot because they're black. But then they start looking at, like, all the things that a typical African-American student might have to face to even get to going into college that, like, a white person wouldn't necessarily have to. So, like, trying to level the field. Like, there's a lot of different discussions and so much happening in this. They also talk about things like when two people are caught for the same crime and how, like, marijuana possession. Like, a white guy would get away with the crime, get a warning, don't do this. Whereas a black guy would be handcuffed, brought in, tried for it, end up in jail for, like, the same amount of marijuana. So, like, there's different expectations for different, colors. We also see the people, the guys from Justyce's neighborhood where he grew up, where his mom still is, that is poor and mostly black, and their relationships with, like, their expectations for whites, but also their expectations for Justyce. Like, they expect Justyce to fail. They don't think he's going to get into college, that he's going to come back, that eventually things are going to fall apart, and he's going to, like... Justyce says that he feels like he's being brought down by two different groups. There's the other kids in his class who don't think he should be there. I think that he should automatically be doing less because he is black. But then there's also the guys in his neighborhood who also expect him to fail. And so he's dealing, like, an uphill battle, but he's feeling like multiple groups trying to pull him down. We also see the dating thing happening here. There's, like, a small romance subplot in here. It's not a huge part of this book. I wouldn't classify this as a romance book. But we see him with his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Mello, who was, white passing. She's got one black parent, one white parent, and looks light-skinned. And how, like, their relationship works. And just the expectations that other people had for them also. But then there's another girl in his class, SJ, who is white, and he likes her, and he's afraid of what his mom is going to say and what other people are going to say, and the expectations that society has for him that's, like, would have for them also. And we're also talking about other forms of racism, too, and, like, discrimination. So, like, SJ's family were in Europe during the Nazi occupation. I think Poland, maybe? But they immigrated to escape that. And so that's very fresh in her family's memories, too. That, like, not only are blacks discriminated against, but, like, there's similar racism against other groups of people, too. And even those who look white can still have this, this history and these, like, traumas from discrimination. So much talk about race in this book. And so many different perspectives, and it's not all easy to get through, but I think it's still very well explained and very personalized, and breaking it down to specific examples that make it easier to comprehend. So I enjoy Dear Martin by Nic Stone, and I highly recommend it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and it's definitely not an easy read. But I do like Nic Stone's writing and her narratives and her, like, people-based journeys. So I do recommend Dear Martin by Nic Stone, especially if you're interested in, like, getting to see different sides of racism and society and other people's perspectives. It's definitely explored lots of different takes and different prejudices and different ways of discriminating. So, solid read. Okay. So, peace out. I love you all, and keep reading. Bye.